Hello, my name's Kim. Welcome back to another video in the series where I read books inspired by D&D classes. Today's video is all about paladins, as you could probably tell from the title. I am kind of taking a approach similar to the R Fantasy board that was published this year, because paladins is kind of a term I don't think is too often used in books, and so I'm using paladins but I'm also using knights, and so there is kind of like a mix of the two, and thankfully we are in the Lady Knight era, so there are plenty of books to read about knights. Starting off though, what am I reading for this video? I have 5 books I would like to read. The first, probably the most obvious, Paladin's Craze by T. Kingfisher. In this series we follow a group of paladins who belong to the Saint of Steel, but the Saint of Steel has died and it has left 7 paladins to face the world without their god. And so we have our main character Stephen and also Grace, who's a perfumist, and they meet and end up intertwined. I'm already literally 2/3 of the way through this, so I'll come back to this in a minute. Another paladin based book is Oathbreakers Anonymous. I want to say by Scott something. I'm sure it's Scott W. I don't have my Kindle on me though. This one seems to pop up quite a bit on Reddit. It's an indie published fantasy. We have a character who's a half-orc who has been exiled essentially from his order because of breaking the rules. He is an oathbreaker. Oh my god, there's a magpie right outside my window. They like to nest like in the guttering right by my window. Let's pick right now to come and say hello. Anyway, and he gets taken in by this order called the Oathbreakers Anonymous, and it's about them banding together and kind of found family, I'm thinking. I did go through the first few pages of that just to see what it would be like, and it seems to be quite tongue-in-cheek humour, and so I'm going on a train journey today, and so the magpie just popped his head out. I'm hoping to get through a little bit of that because I'm not going to take Paladin's Grace with me. Then we move on to our Lady Knights. The reason I waited until now to decide to do this video was because I was waiting for the release of The Isle in the Silver Sea by Tasha Suri. This was one of the books I knew from the get-go I wanted to read for this. I didn't realise just how shiny and reflective it was. It's very shiny. In this we have a knight and a witch, and they are bound together throughout time, and I think there's a curse. Either way, I'm interested to see more about this. And on a similar note, a book that came out fairly recently and has just been popping up everywhere for me. It's The Second Death of Locke by V. Bovalino. In this we have 2 characters, a lady knight and the man that she is bound to, and they have essentially like an oath where they have to protect each other, and something to do with her being able to channel or a conduit for magic, and it's about them finding things, their feelings for each other. I'm looking forward to reading this one. This one has been really popular, and I really love the cover of this one as well. And then finally, on a maybe slightly less linked note, I'm also planning on reading Legendborn by Tracy Dion. This one is one that my sister has been trying to encourage me to read for a long time. Its basis is in Arthurian retelling, and so it is linked to knights, and so I thought this would be a good opportunity to read it. Otherwise I probably wouldn't have picked it up, and so I'm also planning to get to that one. A little bit of background on this though. I'm really enjoying it so far. I knew I probably would. I read Sword Heart 2 months ago now. It's the 1st of November. I tried to think about when I was reading, and I really enjoyed it. This is set in the same world as Sword Heart and also the Clockwork Boys series. I enjoyed the Clockwork Boys series slightly less, but I knew that this was a series that was probably going to be for me. My friends have been telling me to read this for literally months, and as soon as I updated on Goodreads that I was reading it yesterday, I got immediate likes as soon as they noticed it from both of them. And so we follow Stephen and Grace, and they have kind of incidentally stumbled into each other's laps, and Stephen is very reluctant to get involved with Grace because part of the thing for this group of paladins is that they are overcome with like a berserker rage when they go into war, and they still go through that periodically even though they're no longer working for their god because their god's dead. And so he's really afraid that he will do something to hurt Grace and that he doesn't feel like he's worthy of love essentially, and she is the one who's escaped a quite rough background. She has learned very much to fend for herself, and she doesn't want to rely on anyone else, and they're kind of like back and forth between them about that. At the bit I'm at now, she unfortunately has been stuck in a very sticky situation, and Stephen is going to stop at nothing to make sure that she's okay, and they're just coming out of that will they won't they sort of thing that was going on for a bit. They had their argument, and then things have kind of blown up in a way that, despite the fact that they were mad at each other, and that Stephen had messed up and bumfulled over how he was trying to get his feelings out, her safety is more important at this point, and so that's the priority. I definitely think that if you're a fan of Sword Heart, you'll really like this, but if you're a fan of Sword Heart, you've probably read this. The new covers are really good. I think that the artwork is just so pretty, and as soon as I started reading it the other night, I just thought, might as well just go and order the rest of them, won't I? My friends have been telling me that I need to read them pretty much back to back, and I am going to probably intersperse a few of them throughout this video if I do get to them, because obviously some of the books on here are also pretty chunky fantasy books, but I am hoping to get to pretty much the entire Paladin series pretty quickly, because I know I'm going to like them. So they're arriving on Monday. I'll let you know when they get here. Aside from that, that's it. I don't have any other updates. I'm hoping to read a little bit of Oathbreakers Anonymous on the train today, and that's it. I'll update you in a little while. Hello, I finished Paladin's Grace. I'm giving it 4 stars. I did really like it. I think it's just a super easy read, and so if you are looking for light fantasy that's got romance, that focuses a lot on yearning and is a teeny bit explicit, then this is definitely a book that you should pick up. But again, I feel like most people have probably read it at this point. I'm definitely looking forward to picking up the rest of the books in the series. My only complaint about this is that it did wrap up really quickly towards the end, and there's an overarching mystery that didn't wrap up, but it's also a series, so I can't really complain too much about it, because the hope is that it will obviously continue as the series goes on, and we'll find out more about this background mystery, where there is something strange going on, and I'm sure that will probably link quite tightly into whatever is going on in future books as well. So I'm gonna pick up the other ones pretty quickly. I think my plan is to read another book, maybe do a little bit of interspersing. I don't know if I'm going to get through the rest of the series in this video. My plan is to prioritise the other books that I want to read, but if I read quite a few of them, I'm not going to be mad about it. I did also read a little bit of Oathbreakers Anonymous by Scott Warren, and I'm quite pleased that I was right, that it was Scott W. And it is a fairly easy read. We have our main character, whose name begins with an M, I can't quite remember it. He really suddenly has had his powers stripped from him, and from the scene that we see, we're not entirely sure either why he has been stripped of his paladin powers, and he was a paladin of the goddess of fate and things like that. So when he gets back to the city and goes to his temple, someone has already left notes on the door, because they can see into the future and see that he was going to turn up, and they're answering his questions. And so he is just now being found by who I'm assuming are the group who run Oathbreakers Anonymous, but there hasn't been too much more explanation as to where he is and what exactly is going on just yet. But I think it's going to be one that I'm going to find fairly easy to read. It's like I said, it feels quite tongue-in-cheek. The main character is rolling his eyes at things that are happening and just making jokes. And there's a map in the front that's scrawled all over and annotated, which I think is pretty cool as well. That brings me to the end of this clip. I think that I am going to read a bit more of Oathbreakers Anonymous. I'm sorry if you can hear that alarm in the background. And then after that, I'm going to decide which physical book to start. I think I'm leaning towards the second Death of Locke, because I'm really curious about that one. And then after that, I don't know, I might read a little bit of both that and The Isle in the Silver Sea. The Isle, I don't even know what the title, the words, I don't know, and see which one I'm feeling most, and then decide from there. I don't know. You'll soon find out. You'll find out in this next clip, probably, maybe, I don't know. So I have read the first 30-ish pages of this, which features a prologue which sets up the story that our two main characters are essentially reincarnations of, and then we have a chapter from each of them. I want to give each of them a go just to see what the different voices were like. It is actually really interesting because they have these things called incarnates in this world. So I'm holding my phone, it's going to fall out of my hands. Myth and storytelling is known, and so these stories that people are incarnates of and who are reincarnations of people in these stories, everyone knows about it. And there's a scene in the second chapter, we have Simran, who's the witch, and Vina, who is the knight, and they are destined to basically destroy each other, but Vina is exposed to basically someone being wiped out, essentially, someone who's an incarnate and someone's story being removed. There are these little snippets in the front of all the chapters with a piece of text, and it tells you what the archivist's decision is, whether it gets published or whether it's banished and destroyed so that people can't access that story. So I think that's going to be quite interesting, actually, and I was really intrigued by it because I hadn't seen too much about it, but I saw some kind of lacklustre reviews, but it started off quite strong for me, I think. And then we have the second death of Locke, where we have our two main characters, Gray and Keir. I have to say, name-wise, sounds very silly. I don't like their names in the sense that Gray just does not feel like a very fantastical name to me, and Keir is unfortunately the name of the Prime Minister in the UK at the moment, and he's not a great person. His full name's Kiernan in the book, which is less atrocious to me, but the fact that he's got the same name as our Prime Minister, I'm kind of just like, oh. Anyway, enough about politics. The first chapter, because it's a bit of a longer chapter, I was just kind of trying to give them equal weight to see which one I wanted to go into. They essentially have been tasked to go and do something that seems quite intense, and we spend a little bit of time with them together alone as well, where you can really see the bond that they have. They have this tether between them. Gray is a hand and Keir is the captain, but these hands are also known as wells, and they are basically conduits for magical power, and so the mages use their hands as a source of magic, and it seems like these wells of power are dwindling, and it's all tied back to the fact that there was this island called Locke that was destroyed, and that started war all over the place on the continent. I did like it so far. It does feel much more fantasy-y. I have to pull it down. I'm holding my phone here and my hand hurts. I've got cramp. Maybe I can switch sides. Okay. Oh, now I can. Oh, Anyway, what was I saying? Now I've lost it. The writing in the second death of Locke feels more fantastical-y in the sense that it just does. Whereas it sounds really silly, but the Isle of the Silver Sea just feels more modern, like in the way it's written, even though it's not, because it's still set in like olden fantastical times. But yeah, so there is like a difference in the voice between them. I'm actually not sure which one I prefer at the moment, so I might continue to do a little bit further into both of them tomorrow and see, and then pick up whichever one from there. But yeah, I'm kind of equally intrigued for both of them for now. I'm a third of the way into the Isle of the Silver Sea with a keychain as a bookmark. Very resourceful. I am still really intrigued by what's going on. We are getting further into the story where Simran and Veena now have to work together. We have basically learnt that the queen of this land is also one of these incarnates, and she's really desperate to make sure that the incarnates all survive this mysterious kind of threat that is happening for them. But there is other things at play as well, and so they now have essentially run off together to do this little bit of a quest. I think that, well, first of all, the thing that was bothering me about it feeling modern, I think I've placed it now, is because it's, in my head, it was like medieval fantasy, because it is, I think when I first read about it, I think it's because I imagined it was also similar to Legendborn, Arthurian in its retelling, but it's not. It's more like early modern because there was a gun, so it has to be around that time period. That's the medievalist in me, needing to know what historical time period things are set in. I do really enjoy the fact that this is a British-esque story, in the sense that the folklore around it, there's a lot of commentary on the fact that our two main characters have elsewhere blood in them, and what that means in the society, specifically because I did see that this was written in response to kind of Windrush and everything that's happened in Britain, with the arrival of people from the Caribbean on ships and coming here to be workers, and the kind of backlash that has occurred as a result of the British government not properly making sure people's papers were in order, specifically as someone whose grandparents came over in that time period. So I'm really interested to see how that continues to play out, because it's this very British piece of history that is set in Britain but not quite our Britain, and I think that so far is being written really well. Character wise, I don't mind the two characters. There is a little bit of lust, I guess, on Veena's part, which feels fast, but also they're fated to literally kind of be besotted with each other, so I kind of that's just how it is. I literally just picked this one up because I thought I'd just read a little bit more of it, and then I just kept reading it. So this is the one that I'm going to stick with first, and I will hopefully get to read a good more chunk of it tomorrow, because I managed to read literally, I'm 33% of the way in, so I feel like that's a pretty good chunk of reading for tonight. I'm also about 50% of the way through Oathbreakers Anonymous. It is a very like typical book in that there are little mini story arcs. These 4 Oathbreakers who are now going on this quest. I say 4. There's also 5 because of the Ram, who is a paladin. It's very clear that there's probably something suspect about this Ram, and because it seems to be popping up in all these places unexpectedly, and they've just had what would I say is their first kind of mini quest along the quest journey to them trying to figure out how to get their powers back, and one of them has, I mean, kind of vague spoilers, regained their powers, and it was kind of linked to his past and his history. So I kind of see it going forward like that. I think it's really easy to read though, and so if you are looking for something light, indie fantasy, just something to just read, it's like, I definitely don't think it's a bad book at all, and I would recommend it if you're looking for something just that's an easy read, essentially an easy fantasy read that's kind of like a typical classic fantasy, especially because the main character's a half orc, and so there is obviously that stigma around half orcs, which doesn't really happen here. And then there's also goblins as well, and at first with the way the goblins were written, it seemed like it was going to be a bit anti-goblin, but then the goblins turned out to be kind of cool, and I'm someone who, if you've watched any other videos, you know I'm playing a D&D goblin, and so it's important to me that the goblins are the goblins have rights too, so yeah, I do think it is worth the read if you're interested in picking it up. Quick update. I promise I do sit in places other than my bed. However, it is very much work, read, sleep, repeat at the moment, and so this is where I am giving my updates from. I finished Oathbreakers Anonymous. I'm giving it 3.5. I thought it was an enjoyable read. Definitely recommend it, like I said, if you're interested in a kind of simple fantasy that kind of plays on some of the classic tropes, and twists some of them a little bit as well. I'm currently doing reading sprints, and so I'm going to attempt to read more of The Isle in the Silver Sea, and hopefully get another good chunk of this read. My goal is to get it done by the weekend, which I definitely will, because I read like 150-ish pages yesterday, and so I've got plenty of time to read tonight as well. That's the goal. Hello. I did film this clip last night in my car, but then it just didn't really go that well. So again now on my lunch break when I've just got back for an event, and then I'm gonna get to work this afternoon. Anyway, my update at the time was that I had started Legendborn, because I've been getting the train when I've been going into work this week, and so because I finished Oathbreakers Anonymous, I wanted an ebook to read, and I've got Legendborn as an ebook, and I was reading, I was looking for a couple of other things to see whether I was interested in reading those, but I just decided I might as well start Legendborn, and so I managed to get 25% of the way through yesterday on my way to and from work. It follows the main character Bree. She unfortunately has lost her mom, and she also has gotten into this college, and it's like an early entry because her and her best friend both got in, and they're both 16, and so they have now gone there, and on the very first night they end up going to this party and strange things happen, and it is supernatural in kind of nature, and we end up learning that actually there is this order of magic that's linked to the Arthurian legend, specifically King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table and everything like that, and that Bree, even though she hasn't been initiated into this order, can already access part of this magic. And so we have her bestie Alice, they're kind of on tough terms because they've kind of gone to college together, both quite young, but also already like drifting apart within like 3 days. And we have Nick, who is the person who's been assigned to mentor Bree because of what's gone on, and he is a member of this order. He is your typical kind of like good guy, who is going to be her ally. And then we also have Selwyn, who is another person within the order who has a lot of power, who's a king's mage, and who we are on like our third encounter with, and he has just been asked to Bree in every single situation. I did say in the last clip that he's very much given me like first and second year Draco Malfoy villain-esque kind of caricature, to be honest, and I know that like in the future there are 2 love interests, and I'm pretty sure it's the two of like Nick and Selwyn, and at the minute I mean I'm only 25% of the way in, which is quite fast already. Oh my god, there's a very chunky squirrel in my garden right now. Sorry, distracted. It's an absolute chunk of a squirrel. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, I just like the obvious one is like Nick. Oh, they're an ally. They'll be allied together. And Selwyn just kind of feels like, obviously for people to be so invested in his character, he's going to go through character development. But already I'm just like, yeah. But I was pleasantly surprised about how much I have managed to get through. It is over 500 pages, so it's the biggest book that I'll be reading for this video. And I was kind of a little bit daunted by that. I don't read a lot of YA nowadays. I'm very kind of selective of what I do read. And even then, a lot of the time, I kind of go back and forth about whether I should pick up anyway, because I do think that I'm just not necessarily as interested in YA stories anymore. Which is why I hadn't given this a go sooner. It's not to say obviously that it can't be a good book and that you can't enjoy it because it's YA and because I'm not a young adult. And so I am interested to see how this is going to play out. I think, like I said, it's been fairly easy to get through so far. I've got another train journey tomorrow because I'm going out for a little bit, so maybe I'll read a little bit then. We'll see. My other update though, which is kind of good that I am filming this now, is that I did finish The Isle in the Silver Sea. I'm giving it 4 stars. I actually quite enjoyed it. Like I said before, there is obviously commentary on immigrants coming to the country and the benefit of having immigrants. And so specifically I think that story could be said for like any country, specifically any country in the West. I mean, it's something that people will be able to relate to, but specifically knowing this was written by someone whose family has immigrated to England, similar to myself, and especially in the current climate of England and immigration and the whole hoo-ha with all of the governments that we have, and this whole flags that are up everywhere because people are trying to show that their patriotism is linked to the flag, and it's makes you uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to be someone who is not white in the UK. And even though I am someone who was born here, that, you know, my dad was born here, it's my grandparents that moved over here, it can still be quite difficult to be faced with that level of kind of overt racism, because even if it's not something that I necessarily get affected by on a day-to-day basis, it still makes me feel uncomfortable because it means that people could still have that feeling about me and about people like me. And I think that was very clear in the story. It specifically was talking about how immigrant stories from people who were from elsewhere were essentially like hoarded and taken and then destroyed when those stories were needed to make the Isle a better place, because without them it was dying essentially. And we have a lot of commentary on kind of Simran and Veena and their upbringing. We have one of the characters who's an archivist who is quite dismissive of Simran and who is from elsewhere herself or has elsewhere blood, and yet is so staunchly of the opinion that we should assimilate to the Isle and not have those elsewhere elements to their persons. And that's obviously, again, really good commentary on specifically politicians that have kind of crept up in the last few years, I feel like, who have been so dismissive of their own heritage for a country that at the end of the day is incredibly still dismissive of their heritage, despite the fact that they are aligned politically. All of that is to say, I thought that the message was done fairly well, and I did like the way that the story went. I definitely do recommend it if you're looking for a story that really focuses on folklore and kind of myth and legend, and I'm glad that I managed to get to it. I'm gonna actually pick up the next Paladins book, I think, as a little treat for myself, and I'm going to read that, I think, before I move on to The Second Death of Locke. I keep going to say The Night in the Moth. I'm not even reading The Night in the Moth for this video, but it's in my head. And so it keeps on coming up whenever I want to talk about one of the 2 books. So I think it's Paladin's Strength that's the next book, and so I'm going to read that first as a little treat, and then I will finish up Legendborn on my ebook, and then I'll also start The Second Death of Locke properly, and then that's it. I feel like I've wrapped up this video fairly quickly. I know I've still got 2 technically books to read for the video, but it feels like I've been reading quite a bit recently, which is really good. I'm enjoying it. I'm feeling motivated. Hello, it's been a few days, so I have many updates for you. First update is that I started and finished Paladin's Strength. I'm giving it 3 stars. I felt it was a little bit repetitive at times. We have Istvan and we have Clara. Istvan we know from the first book. He's a paladin. He is pretty lucky with the ladies, but obviously there is some kind of deep-rooted things going on, as there is with all the paladins. And then we also have Clara, who is a member of this secret order of nuns, and the nuns have been kidnapped, and essentially it is up to her, or she's put it on herself, to go and get them back, because they have a big secret and she believes that they could be in danger. She also has this secret, and so it ends up getting revealed at a specific point. I won't reveal it here. And essentially Esteban and Clara end up working together on the road to try and track down not only the kind of mystery that was in the first book, which we kind of get wrapped up, but also the mystery of what happened to Clara's nun sisters. So much of it was them travelling on the road, and so it felt a little bit repetitive in that sense. Like, so many chapters ended up with them falling asleep as they're close to the chapter. I know that's a really small thing, but like, it just felt like I could see things happening again and again. I still did like it though, and I did actually last night start a little bit of Paladin's Hope, which is the third book, just because I was like, well, I didn't want to get straight into the second Death block, because I kind of wanted to start fresh on an evening with this, which I'm going to do tonight. So I just read a few pages, and we have in that book Dr. Piper, who we met in the first book, and then we also have Galen, who's one of the paladins as well. As I said, I'm going to be starting this properly tonight. I already got, was it 30 or so pages? 24 pages in. The first time I started it, when I was reading between this and The Isle in the Silver Sea. My other update is I'm just under 3/4 of the way through Legendborn, and I'm kind of pleasantly surprised. I have kind of flown through it. Every time that I've read it, I've read at least 25% of it. So the first day I read 25% on the train on the way there. I read 25% this morning, so I got up to like 50% before I got to work, and on the way home I managed to get up to literally 74%. So it's not going to take me much more to finish the book. I do think that it is obviously a YA book. It still feels quite juvenile at times. We have the relationship between Bree and Nick, and also Selwyn. We now have seen some secrets about him, and he and Bree are kind of, well, at the specific point I'm at, they've kind of unearthed something together, and so you can see why it might be that he then later becomes like a love interest. We're learning a bit more about Nick and Selwyn's relationship, and just more things about the Order in general, and more things about Bree's past that she didn't quite understand as well. I think the lore is quite interesting. I can see very kind of overtly the parallels between commentary on the fact that the magic that the Order do is rooted in colonialism, especially because so many people within the Order don't believe that Bree has the ability to do what they do, because of her skin colour, because of her background as well. And we have an instance where we meet with someone else who is black and who has this other kind of magic, and the kind of comparison between the conversations that they have about magic versus the mentions that the Order do. And so I think it's pretty decent so far. Like I said, I'm kind of pleasantly surprised. I at this point don't know whether I continue in the rest of the series. I feel like I probably wouldn't, but not because I didn't like it, more just because I'm not so invested enough to the point where I need to know what happened. But what I will do is get my sister to give me a rundown on all the highlights, probably, of the things that happen in the other books. I am glad that I finally got around to picking it up though, because I think I'm liking it more than I thought I would, and so it's nice to finally kind of tick that off as something that I've read, because I know that if I had read that a couple of years ago, well, maybe more than a couple of years ago, a decade ago, I would have been really pleased to see some representation on the front cover of a YA book. That brings me to the end of my update. I've got to go because my dinner's nearly finished. Like I said, I am starting this properly tonight, so I'm going to make some headway with that and hopefully finish Legendborn maybe tomorrow, because I'm getting close to the end. We're in the final third, not the third, the final quarter. I can't do maths. Sorry. I finished Legendborn, and you know what, I take it back. I think I would read book 2 actually. The end of the final book, definitely. The final book? The end of the book. I think I meant to say first book, I don't even know. Definitely took a twist. I think that it's really intriguing what has been done with Arthurian legend and how to kind of modernise that. And so I don't think it would be like top priority to get onto book 2, but I think I would actually consider reading it, because I'm curious to see the repercussions of what's happened at the end of the first book and how that plays out. I think my overall rating is going to be a 4 actually. I was kind of leaning towards that last night anyway, and just kind of thought, oh yeah, this will be a fairly decent read. But now that I've finished it, I think that, yeah, not bad. So I'm glad to have read it eventually, and I'm sure my sister will be very thrilled to hear that I liked it. I also got 126 pages. I don't know what I was going to say then. 126 pages into The Second Death of Locke. We have learned a secret fairly early about the history of Locke and the relation that Gray and Keir have to that. And we also, well, we've learnt more than one secret really. We've learnt also about themselves and the connection that they have. It is one of those books where like you are kind of jumped straight in the middle of what is going on. There is so much history with them that we are getting a little bit of insight into, and I don't mind that. We have different elements of their established relationship, the things that they're doing for each other and why, and that are not necessarily being explained straight away because there is so much history behind them, and to them it's just second nature for them to essentially lay down their lives for each other. So there is a couple of interesting things that are kind of going to play out. At the moment I'm kind of curious to see how the rest of the book's going to go, because there is a quest that they've been sent on, a destination they need to get to. Obviously they need to get to that place, so I can see probably a good chunk of the book is them having to do that. And then when they arrive in this destination, what happens when they get there? I've still got another like 300 pages to go, so I am curious to see what exactly is going to happen in the next 300 pages. I have watched a few people's vlogs where they've talked about reading this, and so I have a bit of insight into kind of what's going to happen in terms of Keir and Gray together and what is going on between them. But yeah, I'm curious to see what's going to happen. I'm hopeful to read some more tonight and hopefully get this done before the weekend. So I'll let you know when I have more to say. I think I wasn't intentionally going to read the rest of the Paladins books for this video, but at this rate I'm kind of like, might as well, because when I want to break from Second Death of Locke, then I can dip into the Paladins books, and I reckon I could probably get them all done by the weekend. So accidental 9 books video. I don't even know how many books there is in this video, I've already forgotten. 8 books? I don't know. Accidental many books in this video, but at least I can take the Paladin series off, because that is something that I've been meaning to read for quite a while. I think what I need to do is not say I'm going to do this, this and this, because I'd end up jinxing myself. I am ill and I had a really busy week at work as well. More busy than I expected. I got back later than I expected, which meant that time of being ill, it just means that I didn't want to read. I was too tired, and so I haven't read any more of The Second Death of Locke. I did manage to finish Paladin's Hope the day that I finished that first clip. It is the shortest of the Saint of Steel books, and to be honest it's quite easy to get through in the sense that it moves along quite fast. It is essentially a dungeon crawl. We have, I mean, you can tell a little bit from the cover. We have Galen and we also have Dr. Piper. Both of them we've obviously met in previous books. And Dr. Piper is able to essentially, he's what is called a wonder worker in this world, and he can essentially touch the dead and relive their last moments. And so it's really useful for him to work in the job that he does, because it means that especially in like cases of crime and things like that, they can hopefully get the right person put to justice for what has been done to whoever people. Anyway, there is a Gnoll who plays a present role in this book, and I have to say the Gnolls are one of my favourite things about this whole series. They appeared in Sword Heart as well, and they're just generally a wondrous time, and there are so many intricacies to their culture which I think are really nicely done. But there's a Gnoll who works for the police force, or whatever they're called in this book, and he contacts Dr. Piper because there's a bunch of bodies that keep turning up. It's a different situation to the murder mystery that was in the last book, because these are all turning up. They look like they've been beaten in different ways, and they're all kind of happening to come through the river, and the Gnoll is convinced that there's something going on and wants to investigate, but the kind of lead police guy in charge is like, they're not really trusting the Gnoll, and so the Gnoll, Earstripe, that was his name, I had to remember that. Earstripe, Dr. Piper and Galen go off basically to try and figure out what's going on. They're just going to have a nosy. They stumble upon this place, and
I mean, no spoilers, lo and behold, they end up in this kind of dungeon where they figure out this is where things have been going wrong. And the dungeon part of this I really did like. I thought that it was really good. I thought it was a change of pace from the last two books. With the first book, we are pretty much in the one place, we're in the city, and there's a lot of kind of politicking things going on and a lot of back and forth. With book two, they're travelling a lot, like it is essentially a road trip quest. And with this one, again, it's very quick to action, which is part of the reason I think it's so short. But then also the fact it's so short doesn't do the relationship any justice, I think. As I was going through it, like the one thing about these books in general is that there is very quick attraction between the paladins and whoever it is that they're paired with, which I think is fine, especially for the paladins, because they are so kind of like obsessed with the fact that they really shouldn't be with anyone, and that is a main part of the conflict that they have in all of the books, that they kind of struggle with the fact that with their nature and them being with someone else and the risk of hurting them. Galen in particular is one of the characters who has, you know, really big nightmares, and we know about him quite a bit, especially from the previous book. In this book though, it feels like the relationship just goes so fast, and like at that point it feels like lust, and so it doesn't really feel like we're having a moment for them to be together. Whereas, you know, with Clara and Esteban, for example, they were travelling together for such a long time, they're having to maybe be in close quarters with each other. The length of time that they're travelling is kind of helping, obviously, build up that relationship between each other. Whereas in this one, it is kind of like in the space of the week that they are in this dungeon and on this quest, and then they have like their third act conflict, and then it gets resolved, and it just feels like it happens really quick. In that case, like, I ended up giving it a 3 overall. Again, I enjoyed the dungeon aspect of it, and I think that Dr. Piper as a character is really interesting with his powers, but the romance in this one didn't really do it for me. I wonder if it had been longer that would have helped, but at the same time, because it's not like a super long dungeon book, you also like run the risk of feeling like it's repetitive if they're in the dungeon for too long. So I kind of get why maybe it wasn't so long, but like the other books feels like, I mean, this was under 300 pages, the others are all over 300 to 400 pages. Like Paladin's Faith is, I think, 400 and something pages. So yeah, that's my thoughts on this. Still glad to have read it. I think that the series itself is just a really light series to read. And I'm actually probably going to pick up Paladin's Faith today. I am off work today. I'm getting my car MOT'd, thrillingly. And so while that's being done, I was going to go and have a wander and maybe sit down and read in somewhere in my local shopping centre next to where my car's getting MOT'd. I didn't want to, I was thinking about taking a book with me. Obviously, The Second Death Lock is a quite big chunky book to take with you, and so I don't know how I really feel about taking that with me out today. And I'm also going to London tomorrow to see Hadestown, and so part of me was like, oh, I could read on the train, but again, it's a big book to be taking with me, so I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I've obviously got time today after I get back from my car stuff to read, and then we'll see how I feel about taking it with me tomorrow, and then maybe I'll still finish it before Sunday. We'll see. Either way, I think I'm going to take Paladin's Faith with me because it'll be easier to just get into whilst I'm sat in whatever coffee shop or whatever I end up in. Most importantly, Hayley Williams tickets go on sale today, so that is my first priority. If I don't come back and this video is half finished, it's because I didn't get a ticket and I'm raging mad about it. But fingers crossed that's not what happens. That's my first priority. It's why I'm going to drop off my car early because my MOT time starts when the ticket sales go on. So I am finishing this clip, I'm packing my bag and I'm going because I'm getting one of those tickets. Anyway, I'll update you. Or maybe I won't. We'll see. I'm back home now. Did I do any reading? No. I did get a concert ticket after quite literally an hour, and disappointment, thinking I wasn't going to get it, and then through fate of luck I did get a ticket. I passed my MOT, so I didn't have to pay any extra for my car currently, which was good because I was hoping I wouldn't have to. And then in the strangest twist of fate, the Hayley Williams t-shirt merch that I ordered in September arrived today. So it's a good job I did get a ticket, because can you imagine if I came home to this t-shirt and I didn't have a ticket? Anyway, I'm home. It's only like 1 o'clock, so I have the rest of the day. I need to tidy up a bit, but apart from that, I can obviously get plenty of reading done during the day, so that's the plan. I will get some reading done today, and hopefully I'll actually get to read the second Death of Locke as well. Fingers crossed. It is done. I am giving this 4 stars. I quite liked it. This, I feel like this angle is too high. Hold on. There we go. Better. Sorry. I think this was a really intriguing fantasy world. I think the concept of what we have here with this island of Locke and the power that was there and the magic that was there, and the way that things are resolved throughout this book are interesting. I think that Grey as a character can be a little bit annoying at times because she is a character who is very selfish and prioritizes her relationship with Kia over everything else, but I do like the way that things have resolved in this book. At least I believe it's part of a series. I am interested to know what comes after this because I think that this could have worked as a standalone, and I think that with what happens in the final portion of this book, it obviously leaves it open for more things to happen, but it could have just ended as it did, and so I'm interested. I think I definitely would pick up the sequel to this. I don't feel like anything that I just said is very good at explaining what has happened in this book, but I think it gets to a certain point and you can't really reveal anything because it would be a major spoiler. So I do think that if you're interested in world building, if you want deep relationships, I think that I would actually comp this to Pride of the Orange Tree in the sense that the world building, it feels really similar, it feels really deep, it feels very well done, and so I think that in terms of that, that's what I was thinking of when I was reading this, particularly towards the end, and so yeah, I liked it. I'm not, I was gonna say pleasantly surprised, but I went into it hoping that I would like it, so I'm glad that I did like it. And with that, technically, this video should be coming to a close. I was hoping to maybe take this with me. I think I said in the last clip, when I went on the train yesterday to see Hadestown in London, also a very good play, if anyone's interested. I did end up taking a physical copy and I did put it on hold from the library, but the library hold didn't come through yesterday while I was on the train, which was me being optimistic. I was at the front of the queue, so it could have happened. So I do have this book to read, and it feels like at this point, what is the point in posting this video if I don't finish this series? I would literally read the other 3 books in the series, so I might as well get through it. I could probably finish this today if I really sat down and read it all. I'm probably not going to force myself to do it. If I do, then that's a win. If not, I'm kind of in no rush about it. I'll finish it tomorrow and wrap this up then. But I am intrigued to see where this one goes. I don't know if I explained what this one's about, but we are following Marguerite, who we know from the first book, and her paladin is Shane, who is one of the paladins we've seen the most of. There are still 3 paladins following this that we haven't really heard too much from. Is there 3 paladins? Am I missing them? Yeah, because there was 7, yeah, which are Ren, Judith and Marcus. They are essentially doing a bit of an espionage mission, and so I think that this one, both my friends that have read this gave it 5 stars, and the espionage of it all is something that I will enjoy. I do like that, and I'm glad that it is different. They've all been different enough in their plot, which I think is good, because you kind of worry that obviously the whole point of this series is that all of the Saints of Steel are growing post the death of their god and everything that kind of goes from there. So I am interested to see how the other books will play out whenever they're written, but I am looking forward to picking up this one and seeing what exactly is going on, because I didn't mind Marguerite in the first book, but it'll be interesting to know a little bit more about her, about where she's from and about her backstory and everything in this book. I did start it already. I managed to get 5 chapters in when I was just kind of lightly picking it up the other day. Again, this is so easy to jump in and out of. T. Kingfisher is very much a saint, get it? Because it's a Saint of Steel, for that sort of thing. So I am going to pick up this one, because what's the point of me finishing this video series on Paladins if I don't read the final Paladins book, and I've read literally all the others? I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to go and read. Back in the usual position to tell you I'm 33 pages? I was going to say percent then as well. 33 chapters into this. I'm enjoying it much more than all of the others. I think there is so much more plot in this one. The espionage I knew I was going to like, and it is coming through. She's got to the point where Shane and Marguerite are kind of alone for the first time in quite a while. Literally, you know, just over halfway into the book, and so it feels a lot more of a slow burn. Even though like there's always like very early kind of like lusty comments, it feels more of a slow burn than the others, and so I am liking it very much. I think I'm probably going to sit and finish it tonight, but I thought I'd just tell you that halfway through instead of when I film this update tomorrow post work and I'm like, oh my god, I really enjoyed the book. You know that I'm liking it. The espionage, as I said, is great. The kind of court politics and all of the kind of like fanciness of gossiping ladies, where you actually hear loads of things that are actually really interesting. I'm really liking. They're now off away from that and climbing a mountain very perilously. I'm really liking Ren as well as a character. I'm glad that we're getting to see some of the other paladins, and I guess also the fact that each book you kind of have a secondary paladin, and that secondary paladin is the one who kind of appears in the next one book. Kind of apart from this one, Shane is kind of floated through most of the books. He's one that we've seen quite a bit of, so I'm hopeful that maybe next book will be Ren's book. It'd be really nice to see. So yeah, I'm gonna literally, it's like 9 o'clock, so I could definitely finish this before I go to bed. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna read this book and then I will have finished 2 books today, so I will have technically finished this within the time that I wanted to. It's just this video is gonna go up late. Good morning, an early morning start. Here to tell you that I finished Paladin's Faith last night. Funnily enough, the library haul that I put in came through this morning, so I was close in thinking that it might be soon. I am giving Paladin's Faith 5 stars. I was thinking about it and I was like, should I give it 4? Should I give it 5? I was going back and forth about it because I am very, what's the word? I'm not a 5-star, I think. I'm such a 4-star person. I look back, I've been thinking about like what I'm going to put as my favourite books of the year, and so many books I put as 4 stars because it really needs something to kind of just take me away in the moment for it to be 5 stars. And ultimately, I did really enjoy this one. Plot-wise, this is, I think, my favourite of all the ones that I've read. I enjoyed it plot-wise more than I did Paladin's Grace, which I gave 4. So in that sense, it's a 5-star. I was reading some of the reviews and people were saying that they didn't think that this one had as much romance and there was almost too much plot, and so that's why people liked it less. But then that's what worked more for me, because the romance in this book is the one thing that I mean, towards the end I thought was fine, but in the beginning, in my last update, I was saying about how Marguerite and Shane were alone conspicuously for the first time in a very long time, and obviously something happens, but that scene felt like so kind of shoehorned in, and I think that like personally, I think the tension could have been built more of, oh, we're in this terrible weather, we're in this cave alone and we've managed to start a fire, let's huddle for warmth and be very close to each other, but they don't necessarily have needed to have sex to have been intimate, and then it would have built more, and so when they did get alone the next time, then okay, you know, go for it. But that, I mean, I read that and I was like, oh, like this feels like slightly shoehorned in. And then we move throughout the book, and because there is so many different things going on, like I feel like the stakes are fairly high in all of the books, but for me the stakes in this one felt higher because they were constantly there. We have in the beginning they're obviously doing spy work, and although that bit felt quite slow at times because there's obviously so much information that they could gather, I enjoyed the process of that. And then they move to being on the run essentially, and so there are obviously people following them, and then we get to another section where something else happens. All of that combined kept me reading, and I did really like that. I think plot wise it's been my favourite so far. Kind of just like I was saying in the sense of romance, I think the romance in Paladin's Grace has probably been my favourite so far. I think that one felt more built up. It felt more of a slow burn. I think this could have worked slightly more of a slow burn, because the romance in these books, you see from like very early chapters that they're very much like, oh, this person's very attractive, oh, what am I doing? And I know that's part of like romantic themed books, but it's not something that I'm super big fan of, which is why I don't often read them. But it's by and by. I enjoyed it. I mentioned in the last bit that we hadn't seen anything from like Judith yet, and Judith makes an appearance in this book, which is really good. And I'm really curious now as to see which book we're going to get next, because we have Ren, Judith and Marcus left, and Ren and Judith obviously played a slightly bigger role in this book, so I think it would make sense for one of them to be next. because we've only really seen Marcus once, I think, before, very briefly, and we know that his story is going to be probably quite tragic. So I don't know whether the next book will have Marcus as more of a character. So I kind of feel like it would make sense that it would be Ren, Marcus, Judith. But I don't know. We'll see. That, of course, brings me to the end of this video. I unintentionally, I wasn't going to read the entire Paladin series in this video, but I did, so I can't complain about that. I definitely recommend the series. You can see a lot of the other work starting to weave in, like there's references to the Clockwork Boys in Paladin's Faith quite a few times, and so you can see the kind of overarching story of like the world of like the White Rat and everything that's going on. And I think there are just so many cool little bits in this world that I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the series to see what goes on. I don't think there's a release date for the next book in the series yet, but there's been an announcement that the second Sword Heart book's coming, and T. Fisher puts out like 4 books a year or something wild like that. So I wouldn't be surprised that if sometime in the next like year we get a surprise announcement that there's going to be another book in the series. Either way, I'm looking forward to reading it. And this video has been an unexpected bunch of wins really, because I've had so many 4 stars in this video, and I'm quite pleased with that. So this is the end of the video. I definitely recommend books about paladins. That's my main takeaway. I'm not too sure which one I'm going to do next. I have a few books for fighter, and I also have a few books for cleric I think I'm starting to put together, but we shall see whichever one appeals to me most. Probably won't be till the new year now, so tide yourselves over to then by watching the rest of the videos in the playlist.